Hey Rex, how's it going?
Good, good. Thanks for coming back on. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Now, if you are ready to rock and roll, I'm ready to go. And I just want to say before we get started that, ladies and gentlemen that have an opportunity to listen to this presentation, we are going to be discussing not only the latest updates on Planet 7X, aka Nibiru, but also last time Gill was on the show, he brought up the fact that next time he comes on, he's going to share with us his information on the New Jerusalem that's talked about in Revelation. So that's fascinating. I've always been just amazed at the New Jerusalem that's discussed in Revelation. So let's jump into that first, and then let's get into the latest updates on Planet 7X after that, if we can.
Okay. Um, yeah, the new Mr. Jerusalem has been kind of a mystery to a lot of people, whether or not they can take it as being a real object or a heavenly object or both, you know. And whenever we do a little research into the Hebrew words and everything, uh, the Hebrew text gives us three definitions um, to heaven, three areas that heaven is defined as. It says the first heaven is where the birds fly. Second heaven is where the stars and planets dwell, which are space. And the third heaven, it says only the Father dwells there, which is a outside dimension from where we're living now. And it says that the New Jerusalem comes out of the second heaven, which is space, into our first. So one of the things that we were looking at is which was confusing is when he said he laid out a city in a square. Well, laid out usually infers that he says that he laid out the foundation in a square. That usually misinfers that it's laid out on something that's misexisting. And the only thing that we could find that I could bring to mind that was created at the beginning was there was Eden and the Garden of Eden. It says the Garden of Eden was east of Eden, and that Eden was a separate entity in itself. Well, if we take some of these original measurements and bring it back to the original terms, in the King James, it mentions that it's 1,500 uh, miles across by converting furlongs. But furlongs was not a term that was used by the Hebrews, it was stadians. And stadians were very close to the same measurement, but there was a little bit of a difference. So when we go back and we use the actual measurements, we come up with a diameter of 1,325 miles for Eden, possibly, which is also what the outer dimensions of the new Mr. Jerusalem is. And when we put that on the map, using the Temple Mount as a center, I believe you have a slide for that.
Yeah, let
And
me, the New Jerusalem one?
yeah, where
Yeah.
it's the center of it is Eden. If you look at the Eden, where the center is in on the Temple Mount area, Jerusalem, using it as the center, you
Is
see that it matches the description on what they said the garden was east of Eden, between the Tigris and the Euphrates River.
Okay.
So whenever you take a look at that, it shows the diameter with our new measurements using stadians. That gives you a radius of 662.8 miles from the center. And it says that the Garden of Eden was east of Eden. Well, if you look at the eastern gate, when you draw the cardinal points, right at the point east of that gate would be the Garden of Eden, which is exactly in between the Euphrates and the Nile River, as the text says. Now, what's interesting with this is they didn't have a satellite map. They did not know that point was exactly east of Mr. Jerusalem to better draw this out, and to give us this type of detail. This is a vision from away from Earth's ground. You're this is a sky view or a satellite view
right.
to better is to describe this. Now, if if the New Jerusalem were using this as a base, because it says Eden was removed from our our sight, so this circular region was removed from our sight. And when Yeshua died, he said he was going up there to build mansions or offices, because the word refers to either category.
Okay.
Uh, and he says he laid it out in a square. Well, if you put the next slide down where it shows the overlay of the area with a square in the center of it, which should be the one just above it on the slides that I gave you. Now, this shows a basic square overlaid from the same center. And remember where the text says that he gave the land to the Israelites from the Nile to the Euphrates. Well, when you look at the cattle corner, the northeast corner and the southwest corner, you see where the points touch the Nile to the Euphrates. And what's interesting about this square is that's not a random square. Now, that's with the center being Mr. Jerusalem. When we go back to that previous slide you just showed with the Fibonacci spiral, that shows the Mr. relationship or God's fingerprint again, because all of nature has this, is built off of the Fibonacci sequence of numbers and spirals and such. Well, this has a direct Mr. relationship between the circular shape and the square in the center. This meets the Fibonacci sequence again. And this meets the full text where it says he laid out a square onto a basic surface, a foundation, and that the city is laid out in a square. Now, this is the actual city boundaries, is a square. And this happens to match the territory given to the Israelites. Remember, there was a mirror image of what's in heaven as he's giving them as like an imprint on the ground. Remember how Moses was told to build an ark for the covenant of the 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the second ark, because his image was looking from the one that was in heaven. And he gave him exact dimensions and to build one for on earth as far as the ark. Well, this is also a mirror image on what's in heaven that's going to be coming down here on earth. Remember the Our Father's prayer, where he says where heaven comes upon earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, this is where the second heaven enters. The Bible tells us where this New Jerusalem enters from the second heaven into our first heaven. It hovers above our land in our atmosphere, is what it's describing.
Well, I'm reading a chapter right now, the very first chapter of the New Jerusalem, Revelation 21, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And then, after that, it says, and I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Now, it's this specific text that I'm referring to has actually been translated, the Hebrew translation from the New Testament. I'm looking at a specific translation from scriptureforall.org, and it'll actually break each word down. So, I think that's pretty cool. You can actually look at what the deciphering is, and I find that fantastic. So what exactly is, what does God mean when he says, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband?
Well, men tend to misequate anything that they're very proud of building as a woman's name or something beautiful like a woman. And he's doing the same thing here, that since Yeshua built the city, okay, and he's as proud of it as a bride, he's very proud of his creation that he did here of this new Mr. Jerusalem, and we would be too once we see it. And if you take a look at now the passage that you were giving is after the 1,000-year reign. At the end of the 1,000-year reign, he takes the old earth and casts it into outer darkness, and he makes a brand new one where there's no oceans anymore. You have more land surface, just like it was during Adam and Eve's time. We had 71% more land at that time. And the impact that made the Gulf of Mexico knocked off 71% of our top crust, and that's the volume of our moon. And then the waters receded, creating our oceans today. But if you put the moon back where the ocean layer is a second layer of Earth, just like an onion. The top layer is our crust, second layer is our ocean layer. That top layer is only held on by gravity. It's loose because the continents float, the continents move. And when this whenever this impact happened, it misejected on the opposite side of Earth 71% of our crust, creating the moon. That's why the moon is first mentioned in the Bible text, literally with its name, moon, is during the time of Joseph of Egypt, when he was 17, when he was having his dream, that he said that the 12 stars and the moon bowed to him. And that's the literal first mention of moon in the Hebrew text. In the English text, it's been mistranslated. Every time appointed time is mentioned, they put moon there, because at the beginning of a month, it was called the appointed time. Now, since Hezekiah's time, it was associated with the moon is associated in with the beginning of a month. Prior to Hezekiah, it was not. Isaiah is mentioning that in Psalms, where now the feast are associated with the moon, because they didn't need a lunar calendar before that, because you had 360-day year. It was an even 30-day month. That was only after, when Planet X passed by, did this alter our orbit around the sun, giving us a longer period of time of 365 and a quarter days.
So
All
we're
right.
looking at the calculation on the New Jerusalem right here. Once again, you put these charts together just beautifully. I mean, anybody can understand this because it's all just easy to read.
Well, thank you. I think he's given us information that's pretty much straightforward if we do our little research and reverse engineer basically what he's already given us. But these are, you can see at the top up here in the blue, this is the formula we use for pressure vessels in the oil and gas industry and in many different industries. This tells you how thick a vessel has to be to handle X pressure if it's X diameters or X feet or inches wide. And it tells you how thick the wall has to be, because the same pressure with a vessel that's greater in diameter, the thicker the wall has to be, because you have more surface area. And pressure is worked by so many pounds per square inch. So the larger the vessel, the thicker the wall has to be to handle the same pressure versus a smaller vessel. So I had used these exact same formulas, and the formula automatically comes in with steel, which is our most common one, which is that third one from the bottom. It says steel with a tensile strength of 36,000 psi. When we do the calculations using the 1,300-mile diameter, we're looking for a wall thickness of 210 as the text tells us in the Revelation. Well, when we apply atmosphere pressure of 14.7 pounds, which is what we're breathing right now, for it to have that atmosphere in the space, in the void of space, using steel, that says right here that the wall would have to be 1,428 feet thick. Well, that doesn't match the 210 that the Bible is stating. So let's try to go with something even harder than that. Titanium. Titanium has a tensile strength of 65,300. When we do the calculation, it tells us the wall thickness has to be 787 feet thick. So I was about ready to give up, and then this lady was walking behind me. She says, she asked me what I was doing. I said, I don't have a hard enough material to make my formula work. And she stated, well, the hardest thing is a diamond. Now, only a woman would think like that. And so I paused and stopped for a moment and said, yes, you're right. It's only carbon. And a diamond could easily be this. So it took me about a month or so to find the properties of diamond, and it's the material. The allowable stress for diamonds is there's a soft diamond and a hard diamond. So I took the mid of it. It was 275,000 tensile strength, and it turned out to be a little bit harder than what I needed. So I had to reduce the joint efficiency to 89%, and that gave us exactly the 210-foot thick wall thickness. And the next sentence says the wall was as clear as glass. Well, steel and titanium is not clear. Only diamond is. And there's a huge gap in tensile strength between metals and all the way to diamond. There's a big void there, and then there's a void after that. There's only a small band of hard and soft diamond to hit. And it hit right in that zone, the calculations. of 210 foot thick. So this tells us that the New Jerusalem wall is made out of carbon, which is diamond. And
Fascinating.
and for them to get this right 2,000 years ago, remember this: we only had these calculations within the last 100 years. Material strengths and the math to be able to do these calculations. So that tells us that the outer wall could be made out of diamond that's 210 foot thick. Well, you can show the wall. Now, this is where we have the text underneath there where it says that the wall was 144 cubits, and there's some people have come up with multiple different cubits lengths. Some people say it's the Egyptian royal cubit, which I disagree with. Um, I believe that it's the height of a man of 5'10", which is the average height. We have some gates from Solomon that he built, we have the text where he actually states how many cubits wide the gate is, and we can go back and measure it, and it's 17.5 inches, what a cubit is. Well, that gives you the average height of a man of 5'10", which I believe was the exact same height as Adam, as well as Yeshua, because they state, basically there was nothing extraordinary about Mr. Yeshua's appearance. That is, so he had to have been at least average. He wasn't short and he wasn't tall. And this is the scale of a 210 foot thick wall. It says that each gate is like a pearl. Well, that's their way of saying sphere. They didn't have the word in their vocabulary as sphere. So they said it was like a pearl. There was 12 gates, each gate as a pearl. Well, a spherical gate is the only gate that can hold pressure. If this was a gate on hinges, the pressure would have blown it off its hinges. You don't use flat hinge gates to hold pressure. You use a sphere, just like in a ball valve. And you roll it, and it closes, and you roll it back, and it opens, and it holds the pressure in. And it says, remember how it says the roads are gold color, but yet clear as glass?
Mm-hmm.
Well, champagne diamonds are gold color, and yet they're transparent. All of the colors mentioned in the text, diamonds come in these multiple colors. So here's something that's built once that never wears out. That's an eternal structure, if you call it that. And if you throw up that other side pertaining to the size of the gates again compared to a football field.
Okay, let me find that.
So this is a comparison on how large that one gate, there's 12 gates, how that compares to a football field. It would, from the zero line, it would stretch out to the 70-yard line. You could easily empty a stadium through that entrance of this new Mr. Jerusalem, easily. And that gives you a sense of scale that we're looking at on how large this object is.
You know, one thing I notice about Revelation is there's so much encryption, it seems like. A lot of things are coded. There's definitely numerology involved. They use the number 12 a lot. And I'm trying to figure out what that breaks down to. Have you been able to decipher why they use specific numbers outside of what we're talking about? I mean, is there like a mystical aspect to it as well?
I wouldn't exactly use that word, but remember, if we go back about 500 years and read English, you wouldn't better read it.
Good point.
Okay, so this was originally Hebrew text, originally ancient Hebrew. Okay, so only thing we have to do is remember this is the author that's written. It's Hebrew. It's written by a Hebrew author. It's put in the language for a Hebrew to understand, for the Hebrews to go out and explain it to the rest of the world. Okay, so you have to get into the mindset of the culture and the author and the time period to break down and to understand the language that they're using, because they didn't have as many words as we have in our vocabulary today. Their vocabulary was much more limited, and therefore they use animal and nature to explain mechanical devices, let's say, because they didn't have the terms like plastic or tank, helicopter, or sphere. that type of object.
Right. Right. And I actually went back and looked up that the Hebrew translation, and pearl, that's exactly the word that they use. So that's fascinating.
Yeah. See, we don't have I don't think we have a Hebrew. Well, there is 75 copies of Hebrew Matthew left that we can still find. But you can tell that the old text was originally written in Hebrew. The reason for that is called Hebrewisms. Uh,
Like dialect that they would use.
it's similar to like if let's say a Chinese archaeologist would have came to America, 300 years in the future, and uh, and the culture was just forgotten about, kind of, and he digs up this thing. He reads this text that says, "On Turkey Day it rained cats and dogs." Well, being Chinese, his interpretation is really totally different than an American reading it.
Mm-hmm.
He would probably come up and say, "Well, on this day they worship turkeys and they sacrifice cats and dogs," or something like that.
Yeah.
When instead Turkey Day meant Thanksgiving, which was giving us a date, and that it rained heavily is what it was. It was a simple term. Well, there's Hebrewisms in the text that tells us that this was originally written in Hebrew for the Hebrews. And when we go back and we look at it from its original authors and texts, you have to understand the lengths of measurements, the way they measure things. If you put that Hebrew man up, we are going to reverse engineer the Hebrew measurements. And I'm borrowing the Peruvian man from Leonardo da Vinci, and I'm showing you that just as he was showing us, that the body is its segments follow Fibonacci sequence of lengths and measurements. So a and this happens only with a man's physical shape, not in a woman. If you take average height of a man, which is 5'10", but it could be any man height. 6 of his feet were equal to his height, or 4 of his arm lengths, which is a cubit, from his elbow to his length of his middle finger. That's also the height of him. Uh, these Hebrew measurements come to, this is how they originally took all of their measurements. It was some segment of the height of a man, the average height of a man, which is also similar to the way America got its original measurements, its units of measure. Remember how we have a foot and it's divided into 12 segments. We're the only people on earth that use this, except for the Hebrews. You see, uh, a foot, if you take the width of a man's thumb, there's 12 thumbs in his foot, in the length of a foot. And that was what we call an inch.
Okay.
And so on and so on. Well, a stadian is equivalent to either 400 cubits or 600 feet of the average height of a man. That was a stadian. And that runs a little bit shorter than what a furlong is. The author was just converting it straight from stadians to furlongs, but he didn't do the math to do any correction because he's just an author. He was just writing it down. But this, uh, you see, a royal cubit, a palm length, width, 6 palms equals a cubit. 7 palms equals an L, or I can't even pronounce the name of it in Hebrew, but that's where you get the royal cubit from. It
Okay.
being 7 palms length instead of 6. But they specifically say if it's a royal cubit or a regular cubit, or they would use the word L, or like their Hebrew word. So when they say cubit, they mean a regular cubit. For us to imply that it's a raw cubit is wrong of us, if they're stating a regular cubit. So if you look to the right of that, and we do our calculations according to the new Mr. Jerusalem, you see that says that 12,000 stadians. Well, look how Mr. Unique these measurements are. Uh, Let me pull up my chart. I can't see that one very well. Okay. It says a stadium is equivalent to 7,000 inches.
Okay.
Well, 12,000 stadiums multiplied times 7 gives you 7 million feet. Isn't it unique that 7 is here? And that gives you 1,325 miles across, which is exactly, okay, also 12,000 stadiums is equivalent to the height of a 5'10" man, 1,200,000. A nice even number, 12
How
at the
about
beginning.
that?
The New Jerusalem is based on the height of Yeshua, or the height of it. He used his own height to blend into the measurements of all of this. And remember, when John was walking through there, they handed him a staff, a rod, a reed, and it was 6 cubits long. Well, that cubit is equivalent to 17 points, 17 and a half inches cubit. So that would give you a measurement of I don't have it written. It's equal to 6 cubits. But that's what he uses in John in the book of Revelation to measure this whole structure out. He's measuring a real structure that he's laying this rod to figure out the measurements. And what's interesting is when you stand in the center of a dome structure, its height is equal to its width and its length.
Okay.
From your point of view that he's writing it. If you follow his path of walking, he starts with the gate. Well, first he talks about the appearance. He says it looks like a mountain. Well, dome, if you wanted to give it a material type description, and you're limited on the words, that would be a good description. A dome would be like a mountain. Then he talks about the gates. As he's getting close, he talks about the gate. Then he measures the wall of the gate and the pearl, Then he says how the road is clear as glass as he's walking to the city in the center. Then he measures the center. Then he talks about when he gets to the center of the city, that the height is equal to its width and length. That's exactly the viewpoint you would have if you're standing in a dome. So he's given us a step-by-step description.
I was just going to say real quick, and this is kind of a little bit off subject too, but one of the things that always comes to mind with the New Jerusalem when the passage says there will be no more pain, no more suffering, and I almost wonder if there's any emotion whatsoever at that point in time. I guess maybe I watched too much Star Trek growing up, but when I think of this New Jerusalem sometimes, it almost kind of reminds me of like a cube structure. And then when I read a passage like that, I think, hey, does that mean that we're not going to have any emotions whatsoever at this time, or is it going to be a completely different mindset? Have you ever thought about stuff similar to that? Not necessarily Star Trek, but just wondered what that passage meant. No more pain, no more suffering. Do you think there'll be any emotion left?
Yes, there will. I mean, I think we see it says heaven is coming on earth. People miss that point. That there, you have to get back to the original Hebrew text. Okay, the Almighty created real, tangible miracles for the Hebrews. He created tangible human beings. Okay, with tangible effects to them. And it states clearly that the new heaven, the New Jerusalem, is a tangible object coming down onto a new earth. The first earth, remember, at the beginning of the 1,000-year reign, is still the old earth. And the New Jerusalem hovers above the earth. Remember where the Antichrist is looking up and he sees it standing on a sea of glass?
Uh-huh.
That's the bottom of the New Jerusalem, hovering at the cloud, at the cloud level. He can only see it as a sea of glass. He doesn't see the upper structure. Okay. And during that time period, only the evil ones are on earth, and it says God's wrath is only on the evil at that time. That's the 7 bowl judgments. Is God's wrath on the evil?
Okay.
Now, whenever he defeats the Antichrist and his army, people put back on the earth. They make up the nations. The bride and the bridemaid live in the New Jerusalem, hovering over the earth. They leave there on their day-to-day, governing over the nations, teaching them the rightful way of living on earth, showing them how to build holy, righteous character. Okay, and they're there on earth, for 1,000 years. At the end of the 1,000 years, is when the evil ones are resurrected and they're judged, and they're cast away with the old earth into outer darkness. And he makes a whole new earth like it was during Adam and Eve's time, a perfect earth, canopy of water with 3 times more land, vegetation, perfect growing condition globally. You don't have these extreme coldness regions and hot. And then the New Jerusalem sets on earth and God dwells with us, it says.
Right. And
See?
one thing that's also very fascinating is the description of God in the throne room with the creatures around him that have eyeballs covering their entire bodies.
Yeah, I think that's kind of lost in translation a little bit too.
What's your take on that, Gil?
Well, some of this stuff, remember, you have people translating stuff, and they have some of these translators have no background in astronomy. Just like it says in a text where the moon is at the foot of the woman. Well, the author doesn't say it's Virgo, but you have to understand that you're looking in heaven, in the space, because it talks about the moon, and
Okay.
that the crown of stars. Often, the crown of stars is the 12 signs of what we call today the zodiac, but that's an improper term. Hebrew called it the Mesodah. The zodiac reads the star pattern from the daylight skies. That's the occult version. So, in other words, to see Virgo in the daytime skies, you'd have to use September. That is
Okay.
not the way the biblical text teaches us. It teaches us where, and remember, daytime skies are only read by a few people who have short charts or software. The signs in the sky are made for everyone to see, and they're in the nighttime skies. And you see Virgo in March or April because you can't see stars in the daytime. You can only see them at nighttime. It says there's a crown of 12 stars above her head. That could be Leo, or it could be the exact 12 constellations crowning her, whichever way you want to look at it. Then it says the moon is at her foot. Well, you also have to take into account the other part of the story is it talks about it says day noon would be uh, midnight, and midnight will be noon, or there'll be, in other words, night is day and day is night. Well, an eclipse can only give you darkness. It can't give you light. So what they're talking about is a 12-hour delay in Earth's rotation, where noon is midnight and midnight is noon. And so Earth's rotation is slowed down by 12 hours. And when we read Joshua's long day, it talks about also the moon being delayed. You can put that slide up if you wish,
Yeah, let me find that one.
and it shows that that there's a certain day here in the future. I only found that recently about delaying the moon by 12 hours. I was only delaying Earth's rotation. So what I found out recently that we're have to delay not just the Earth's rotation, but also the rotation of the moon, and that's a new revelation to me recently. So when we looked in the future on March 15th, 16th, when we delayed the moon by 12 hours, it puts it exactly at the foot of Virgo. And then the text also goes on to say that the woman is pregnant. Well, the king planet Jupiter is in the belly of Virgo at this time. And it says only that woman is illuminated. Okay? Well, the model shows us when this planet comes around, it has a tail like a comet. The comet tail points opposite of the sun. Therefore, only illuminating Virgo. None of the other 12 constellations are illuminated. Only Virgo is illuminated. Now, the average person may not know that the constellation shifts over a month every 2,000 years. 2,000 years ago, during Passover, it was the scales of Libra, scales of judgment, or paying a debt was in the skies at the time when Yeshua was being sacrificed. Remember, Yeshua is dictating to John what to write in the book of Revelation.
Okay.
He said the skies were a calendar for the ones who pay attention to it. You do not use the stars for your day-to-day lives, predicting your day-to-day affairs. It's uh, the Almighty's way of His appointed times. Now, I cannot tell the future. I have no predictive magic, let's say abilities of predicting anything. I can only look at the stars like you would a calendar. You can look at a calendar to tell you when it's going to be a full moon or a new moon, but you don't know for sure if it's going to be there. You're making a estimate by what you're reading the data. Well, the software tells me that this lineup can happen on this day, March 15th to 16th of 2017. That, matter of fact, my previous observation, I thought it was March 26th of 2016. But on that day, I did not delay. I didn't have the information yet to delay the moon by 12 hours. If I would have delayed the moon by 12 hours, the moon would have been halfway up her leg. It would not have been at the foot of her, as the text says. And she's not pregnant with the king planet, Jupiter, as it is in this March coming up, as the text stipulates. This is, now, the moon has a tilted orbit. I'm trying to pull from memory, but I believe it has like a 18-year orbit for that tilt to be at the foot of Virgo, exactly the way it's stated. Then Jupiter has like a 11.7-year orbit for it to be in Virgo's belly. It won't be there for another 11 and a half years. And this has to be exactly timed, exactly 3.5 days after a full moon, after the Feast of Passover, which is this date. Only thing missing that we don't know, because we haven't sighted it yet, is that planet. And we won't be sighting it probably till after the internet is down and they have control over the people. But this arrangement is extremely unique.
And if that's the case, if this takes place within, well, it's going to be, I guess, with less than a year, obviously, because in March next year, so about 7 months, will that, so everything would have to take place. We would have to have financial meltdowns. We would have to have internet shut down. I mean, multiple things are going to have to take place from now to that point in order to correlate with Revelation and the additional timelines and stuff that has all been put together here.
See, there's two taking aways in the scripture, and that's confusing because people are trying to labor it under a brand new word called rapture. Okay? The actual text says taking away, and it says it more than once, and there's two taking aways because they're defined completely different. The last taking away, which is most commonly referred to as the rapture, is that all believers, you can be anywhere in the world, the dead of first are taken, then the living, and you're brought to heaven. That qualifies that taking away. The first taking away is qualified completely different. It says, it doesn't mention the dead. It mentions that you have to be specifically in Jerusalem at Mount Zion, that only the living and only a remnant of believers are taking away, and you're brought to the wilderness for 3.5 years, which is the bride and the bridemaid, two different groups. There's two taking aways. Now, this date we're giving right here is the first taking away. This is the beginning of the Great Tribulation. A remnant is brought to the wilderness, shielded from the Great Tribulation. And Elijah has to come and announce the arrival of the Messiah coming mid of week, mid of night, and he arrives at the Feast of Passover. The Feast of Passover, you are required to practice that in Jerusalem only throughout all of these years. Passover is not practiced in the rest of the globe, not the way that he states it. He states that you have to be in Jerusalem because it's a rehearsal pattern. Now this rehearsal pattern is going to be a real event. So,
with that being said, let me jump in real quick if I can. Do you think that that date is going to be just slam packed in Jerusalem because people have read this, so it's going to be very difficult to get in if you're not already there?
I think Israel's population will almost double. Somewhere between 3 to 5 million people will be showing up. They have enough land area. Remember Sukkot? Sukkot is a practice of building temporary shelters. Remember, these are not vain religious acts. These are things to get you physically prepared Sukkot is another practice run you're supposed to do in Jerusalem. Building temporary shelters is something you're going to need. There's not going to have enough hotel rooms and places to stay. So there's going to have to be temporary shelters built for people to be there for that Passover.
I'm sure it'll be a madhouse.
Israel has, well, remember, the temperament of the people are waiting for the Messiah. They're not going to be, it's not going to be like a refugee camp like Katrina or these Assyrians, or, it's not going to be that type of system because the temperament of the people is totally different. They're waiting for the Messiah and they're working together. And they know it's going to be a little rough. You're not going into this thinking it's a piece of cake. Because the Bible says that this day right here is going to be the worst. This event, the Great Tribulation, is the worst event in all of Earth's history, it states. Now, knowing Noah's flood happened, and that's not the worst, that this next event of Planet X is going to be the worst. We're fixing to live through the most significant point or time in biblical texts, in the biblical accounts. It hasn't already happened. It's about to happen. And it's whether or not his people are prepared for it. Because he gave them rehearsal patterns to practice to where to be at the right place at the right time. This is not vain religious acts. To survive the tilting of the earth, at 26 to 28 degrees, you need to be at the pivot point. Pivot point is to the side of the tilt. This tilt, the pivot point, will be near Jerusalem, around the Persian Gulf region. Therefore, you have the least effects. If you're 90 degrees on either side of Jerusalem, when this tilt happens, if you're on open water, let's say, you're looking at 300-mile-an-hour winds. If you're on land, because land tends to slow down the winds, you're looking at least 150-mile-an-hour wind. Now, if you've ever been in an F5 tornado that generates 300-mile-an-hour wind, grass does not stay in the ground.
Jeez.
If you're in a hurricane at 150 miles, which I've been in, trees don't stay in the ground at 150-mile-an-hour wind. Now, that's going to be global, all the way around. If you go 90 degrees and draw a circle all the way around the Earth, that puts you about midway of South America, midway of Australia, off the coast of Alaska. The waves of the Pacific and the Atlantic right there are going to be tremendous. Then the Earth is going to tilt. So you have not a tidal wave, you have a water surge that's constant for 6 hours coming in and 6 hours leaving. So that tidal surge, water will go in hundreds of miles inland. And there's a bulge of water roughly about 12 kilometers at the equator. That's caused because of centrifugal forces. Earth will stop rotating. That water is going to dissipate towards the south and north poles. But that would take a couple of weeks for it to get all of the water to the north and south pole. But you will have a 12-hour effect, if not a 24-hour possibly. Partial effect of this. So in other words, like Canada, most of Canada would be underwater. A lot of parts of Europe will be, a lot of parts of Russia is very low. You have water rushing in from the coast that won't stop for almost 12 hours until Earth starts spinning, getting back its full speed again.
And then it'll be spinning the other way.
No. That's fiction. It's going to continue to spin the proper way. Our lightning bolts from this planet will be 30 miles across. You can see one of these strikes if you look up the Eye of the Sahara in Africa. You can look at it on Google Earth. That is an impact crater from a 30-foot wide lightning or plasma arc, is what it is actually. Plasma, the same thing as lightning. And it carved away 300 feet of that mountain straight down. It didn't melt it. It separates the atomic structure. It goes back to the periodic table. of elements. Basically turned it into powder. And
Did you say 30 feet or 30
30,
miles?
30 miles.
Like the width of a lightning strike, 30 miles.
Yes.
Wow, that's insane. You know, that reminds me of the theory of the Grand Canyon was actually created via electricity. I don't know if you've done much research
Yes.
in the electric universe theory, but I had Wal Thornhill on the other day, and wow, he sure did explain the electric universe theory very eloquently.
Yes. This shows. See, you can't have an electrical arc of that type hitting Earth unless you have a capacitor holding it. Planets act like a capacitor. Remember when comet Siding Springs passed by Mars, the physicists predicted that there would be electrical discharge because the physicists were saying the universe is an electromagnetic model, and astronomers say no, it's gravity ruled. Well, the physicists made a prediction that there'd be an electrical arc between the two, and NASA was filming it just before. Remember, there was like a 7 to 9 second delay before the public would see it. They cut away just before the arc happened. We have an amateur astronomer from Spain that went to one of the islands off their coast and filmed it with his telescope. The whole planet of Mars. Remember, this is just a rock passing in space, maybe a few miles across, whatever. It lit up the entire planet like a light bulb, like one giant EMP wave. So reverse the size now. That Earth is the rock, and this other object is the bigger piece, because it's anywhere between 5 to 7 times the diameter of Earth, and it's going to pass close enough to where there's a lightning, a discharge that's going to hit Earth. If you have any electronic devices on at that time, they're going to be zapped. Matter of fact, 3 days prior to the arrival of the Messiah, 3.5 days prior to that, all generators globally will have to be turned off. So people will be in the total darkness at night. And when Elijah shows up for that feast of Passover, it's going to be an old-fashioned Passover with candlelight and oil lamps. There'll be no media or news or radio stations there because there's no power to transmit. It'll only be for the people in Jerusalem to know that Elijah has arrived and hear his words and say the Messiah will be coming mid of week, mid of night, 3.5 days later, where he comes mid of night, which is the same night as a meteor shower, opposite side of Earth. You have two separate events happening on Earth at the same time. Half the Earth is going through a meteor shower. The other half is in darkness. The darkness side is the safe side. In March, the daylight side is hit with a meteor shower. Yeshua comes mid of night, which is the backside. After a 12-hour day, a 12-hour rotational delay in Earth's rotation. Therefore, the astronomers which have not accepted the plasma universe will make an error. It would take 50 years before the books are changed. We don't have 50 years. We don't even have 50 months. And I think it's even less than 50 weeks. So if people have to come to their own understanding that they will predict the Middle East and Europe, that half of the globe, to be hit by meteor shower. And this is where the false miracle of the Antichrist will be producing his miracle, which is a false miracle. This Mahdi will go to the Middle East, which all the astronomers will announce that that side of the Earth is going to be hit by a meteor shower. The Muslims are going to try to get a visa to come to the West. They'll be refused because of the terrorist activities in Seal 4 that is mentioned. A quarter of the world is held hostage over terrorism, over the threat of death, which the peace agreement is where this world leader is going to strike an agreement with the mullahs that they will stop their terrorism if Israel gives up the West Bank for the rest of the world to have peace. And they force Israel to give up the West Bank. That's Seal 5. Seal 6 is the first meteor shower. So here's the Muslims trapped in their own country without a visa to leave. And they're being told that they're going to be wiped out by a meteor shower. Here comes this Mahdi saying, don't worry, I will change times and laws. I will change the rotation of Earth by 12 hours and cause fire to fall on our enemies. This is a false miracle. The scripture is already telling us what will happen, that the Almighty has it in his hands, and that that's going to happen just like in Joshua's long day. Earth's rotation will slow down by 12 hours. You have 12 extra hours of daylight on one side and 12 extra hours of darkness on the other side. Which, remember where it says the four corners of the earth, he sends four angels to stop the winds? Well,
Oh, yeah.
the winds can't stop unless the winds are created by Earth rotation. So the winds are stopped because Earth rotation stops. He makes another statement where he says daylight will be night and night will be daylight. Well, you can only have that if you have a rotational delay of 12 hours, where noon is midnight and midnight is noon. Therefore, the target zone is off by 12 hours. And it says 1/3 of grass, trees, and rivers are hit by a meteor shower. That is describing North and South America, because that's 1/3 of continental crust. When you add rivers in there, you're talking about fresh water. He's describing continental crust. So this is the false miracle of the Antichrist. And so at that same time as the false miracle is being acted, Yeshua is picking up a remnant out of Jerusalem and bringing them into the wilderness, where they're safe for 3.5 years, through which is the Great Tribulation. Great Tribulation is only 3.5 years. The peace agreement is set for 7 years, but the Antichrist breaks it midway. So the Great Tribulation is 1,260 days. Then the dead are risen, and then the living are brought into heaven. There are two taking aways. And people are confused about changing the terms into rapture. Bring it back to the original term, taking away. One taking away is to the wilderness, one taking away is to heaven. They're defined completely different. And because he gave us these rehearsal patterns, he's telling us where to be at what time to be. Picture two planes, one leaving Europe coming to America, and one leaving America going to Israel. And when they get midway, here's something that Yeshua said that really is poignant to these two planes crossing. He says, those who try to save their life will lose it, and those who try to lose their life will save it. Because we don't have to go against the prediction of the astronomers, because they have the wrong model. They have a gravity rule model they're looking at, and the physicists have it more correct. It's a magnetic ruled universe. Therefore, the target zone is 12 hours off. And actually, the Middle East is the safe area, or Jerusalem. And without having the correct science backing it, and remember, I'm saying this before they even predict this, because the math and the science is already laid out in the text.
It's incredible. I mean, this information, one of the things that I really appreciate about what you do, Gill, is you interweave prophecy with science and data at a level that most people don't do, let alone even if they could, they don't. So, I mean, it's just mind-blowing the way that you've brought this information to the table with the charts and the slides. And with the last 15 or 20 minutes that we have left, I wish we could go a lot longer, because it's just amazing to listen to you speak. Plus, you have so much information, but I've got another show that I've got to do, and I really wanted to get this in here because there's been a lot of new information out about the possibility of a planetary body such as Planet 7X or something similar on the outer skirts of our solar system. There's been many images that I've seen that are pretty compelling. I would say, though, 99 out of 100 of them, and I've seen thousands, so still there's a few that I've seen that I can't explain. But have you kept track with a lot of the new pictures and images and data that's come out?
Well, let us back up what we're about to say with logic and sound thinking. Okay, not emotionally ruled. All right. I would love to see a picture of Planet X, because I know this is a real object, and I would endorse a real picture in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. And how do we define if it's a real picture or not? With confirmation of multiple views. Okay, and how do we do that? How do we determine it from atmosphere anomalies, camera glitches, reflection off a glass when you take a picture, if glass is in front of the camera, there's a red dot, which is a sensor bouncing off the glass. Or if the sun is shining within the lens, there's something bright, some piece of metal that's bright, that it reflects the image. These are the qualifiers of a real image. You'll see it every day during a given period of time. Two, if it's really there, then between 2 to 3 million amateur astronomers that the government cannot control, they'll take close-up pictures of it outside our atmosphere. Just like we're looking at Mars through a telescope, or Venus, or Jupiter. You have a detailed picture of it showing the characteristics of the planet. Okay? This object, for it to reach this March, it's not at the end of the universe. If this object would be at Neptune's orbit, it would take 16 years to reach us during normal orbital mechanics, which is what we're following. For this to be here for March, it'd have to be somewhere between Jupiter and Mars, around the asteroid belt at the moment. And what was so when we do see it, so far everything I've seen on the internet that's not a true sighting of it. They're caught up in their emotions, and they're not backed up. If it was really there, 2 to 3 million amateur, you'd have close-up pictures in space of this object, and it's not there because it isn't. Right now, it's cloaked. We have Reagan put up there. Remember when Reagan gave a speech? He said if we had an outside threat from space coming towards Earth, that we would unite. We'd put our differences aside. Yeah. Everybody thought he was talking about aliens.
Yep.
No, he wasn't. It was this planet. He knew about it. He developed the Star Wars defense system for multiple reasons. It has multiple uses. One, it can create a hologram in the sky. Two, it can knock down missiles. Three, it can cloak an object in space. It bends light. And there's videos that show you how lasers can bend light. You can see right behind an object. So they're using the technology to bend. Otherwise, we'd see it 16 years ahead of its arrival. Amateur astronomers, not dependent upon government. And we see all the effects of a planet coming in, but we cannot have pictures of it yet because it's still cloaked. And they won't uncloak until after they have control over the people. When you see a bailing of the banks, that's rationing of money. After that, they'll ration food, and then they'll ration fuel. When you do those three things, you have control over the people. Then start looking up. Between Sagittarius and Capricorn, you should see a super bright star, just like you're looking at Venus in a nighttime sky, or Jupiter. Even when it comes around to the sun, it'll still look like a star. It may have a tail then, but not until the last 2.5 weeks or so, as it approaches, will it actually get large and scary. And but telescopes would give us a nice clear view of it. And so the internet will go down. That's the only way they can control 2 to 3 million amateur astronomers from giving you pictures. And you're pretty much on your own. You have to deal with your own knowledge, where to look in the sky, know the timing, and know what to do. When you see it, then you travel to Jerusalem. That will be the only safe place during a pivot point when Earth starts to tilt. Any other place else on planet Earth is a random hit, yes or no. You might make it or not. But the majority of the population of Earth will not survive this first and second event. You'll have another meteor shower 5 months later, where it was its entry, where it came in. There's a debris field left, and Earth, the planet, is already going outward. It's out and going into deeper space. 5 months later, we're running into the second debris field, and it will be at nighttime, and it will be again on North and South America, because it says they wish death for 5 months before death comes. Death comes 5 months later.
You know, another thing, too, that you brought up is there are large financial institutions in Europe right now that are taking huge losses. Deutsche Bank, thank you, took a 98%. And then so what I have done is I pulled up, I just wanted to share this with you guys real quick, because we talked a little bit before the show also about some of the things that I was noticing back in 2008 when I was working for a Fortune 100 company. And I talked to a friend of mine that worked there. He used to work with the Department of Defense and has been to Langley and Pentagon, all over the place. You know, he's pretty well connected. And I brought up to him, I said, hey, have you been keeping track of our company's stocks? Have you been seeing what's going on? He said, no, tell me about it. And I started talking about it. He said, be ready. In the next few weeks, they're going to start laying people off, closing down stores. And I was one of the fortunate ones that didn't get let go because I was doing good enough for the company not to be. But everything he said happened. And if you look at the charts right here, if banks start going down, you guys, big ones, and they're going to be connected with the stock charts here. Now, we've got three major stock charts pulled up here. I've got the Dow Jones, I've got the Japanese, and then I've also got the European stock chart pulled up here. And as if you take a look at this, you can see that back in 2008, when stocks got cut in half, even worse than that, they all kind of go hand in hand here. They're all connected here. When they start to go up, the other ones start to go up. So this entire global economy, in my opinion, is interweaved all together. So if we start seeing big banks go down, the stocks are going to go down. And if this is a serious pull, not just a cyclical 2008 scenario again, if this is back, let's get to the even maybe worse than the original depression from the early 1900s, then we could see some serious chaos like you're talking about.
Yeah, Deutsche Bank announced that they lost 98% of their revenue, their profits from the previous year. And Deutsche Bank is one of the major banks in Europe that's been keeping many of the bankrupt countries from going under. Italy is one of them. Italy, I believe, has the 8th largest economy in the world. If Deutsche Bank does not keep them afloat, then you're looking at Italy collapsing. And then the rest of the European nations don't have the banking system or the equity to float Italy. So you're looking at Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland going bankrupt. And that will cause major problems to the rest of the EU. So I think they're doing a bailout right now for the Deutsche Bank, which is like putting a Band-Aid on a major illness. It's only going to buy them a couple more months. So around September or October, I'm expecting some pretty bad financial news to come out. Keep your eye on Europe for a bail-in to start happening. Keep your eye also on what's called national emergency. That's another way of, that's a different type of martial law. And then watch it go over to Asia, and then after Asia, it's coming to the Americas. You'll see financial collapse, and it'll happen probably very systematically and very quickly, one after another. You should have reserve cash at home. You should have reserve foods to take you to at least January. If you don't plan on moving, then you need at least close to 4 years of food, even to try to make it. Otherwise, if you go to Israel, then you won't need that. You can buy up another couple months of food there and wait for the Messiah. But the next seal to happen will be economic collapse, which would be a bail-in. And that's the first form of controlling the people. And they have to do this before the planet arrives or before they see it. And then after that, you see terrorism, which will cause a famine, shortage of food. And then the government will be rationing food for people. So if you have your food at home, you should be able to go through this crisis better than having to stay in line, waiting for the government to give you like a handout. And that's why his people follow the Almighty's instructions. He says on a Sabbath and a Jubilee year, you get your finances in order and you put food aside. And this is why he's getting his people prepared. Economic collapse, and that will happen probably during a Sabbath or Jubilee. And I expect the peace agreement to happen towards the end of this year, and a 40-day announcement to happen somewhere possibly around the end of January. And that will confirm the arrival date, and as well as what Hebrew calendar to follow. Because whatever the day of the crossing is, we know 3.5 days earlier than that would be the Feast of Passover. And the people can get the free information by going to my website, planet7x.net. All the way at the bottom, I have links for a Google Drive or a Dropbox to where they can download the free book and a free wall wall charts, and different other data to help them study the Bible, because it's factually correct. And the only way that this proves that there is an Almighty, because this is futuristic predictions made 2,000 years ago. This should be a comfort to anyone who has a knowledge that God exists or the Almighty exists. This is confirmation that He does, because He's given you usable information and predictive powers that man did not have on what to come. And it was before they have any knowledge of this science of a plasma universe, and with the model that tells us exactly the sequence. We have astronomical models that the sequence of events listed in Revelation is exactly what the astronomical model shows us. And you can't guess, no man can guess that accurately for that type of scenario.
Well, I got to tell you, Gill, you certainly bring some of the best information to the table I've ever seen, and I am very appreciative of you coming on the show with us, spending time out of your day. I know that you said before the show that you've been doing so many interviews recently that you had to take a break, so I just feel really honored and blessed that you came on here with us at the Leak Project. And folks, make sure to check out planet7x.net. We looked at just a few of the graphs and charts that Gill has put together. I mean, he's got dozens more. And also go to leakproject.com. If you become a member at Leak Project, you'll get access to exclusive content, as well as subscribe to youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. We have a new YouTube channel called William Wallace Channel. If you see any other channels, folks, that are peddling the Leak Project videos, those are not our channels. I've had several people reach out to me recently saying, hey, did you open up another Leak Project channel? No, I did not. So I really appreciate you guys bringing that to my attention. And Gill, before we close out tonight, my friend, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
No, I think that pretty well covers it. It's just that we have a date here coming up of March 15th, 16th to be very alert to. I think this December, at the beginning of Hanukkah, after the sun sets, look up in between Capricorn and Sagittarius. You should see a brand new large star, and that would signal that that is Planet X, because there's no planets in that area, according to the software model, except for this one. And that would give us confirmation that we need to go to Jerusalem. And I thank you and your audience for letting me take the time to explain this.
Absolutely. Look forward to speaking with you again sometime. And folks, remember, be the change you want to see. Have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon. All right.
Hey, Rex, how's it going?
Good, good. Thanks for coming back on. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Now, if you are ready to rock and roll, I'm ready to go. And I just want to say before we get started that, ladies and gentlemen that have an opportunity to listen to this presentation, we are going to be discussing not only the latest updates on Planet 7X, a.k.a. Nibiru, but also, last time Gill was on the show, he brought up the fact that next time he comes on, he's going to share with us his information on the New Jerusalem that's talked about in Revelation. So that's fascinating. I've always been just amazed at the New Jerusalem that's discussed in Revelation. So let's jump into that first, and then let's get into the latest updates on Planet 7X after that, if we can.
Okay. Yeah, the new Mr. Jerusalem has been kind of a mystery to a lot of people, whether or not they can take it as being a real object or a heavenly object or both, you know. And whenever we do a little research into the Hebrew words and everything, the Hebrew text gives us three definitions to heaven, three areas that heaven is defined as. It says the first heaven is where the birds fly. Second heaven is where the stars and planets dwell, which are space. And the third heaven, it says only the Father dwells there, which is outside dimension from where we're living now. And it says that the New Jerusalem comes out of the second heaven, which is space, into our first. So one of the things that we were looking at is which was confusing is when he said he laid out a city in a square. Well, laid out usually misinfers that he says that he laid out the foundation in a square. That usually misinfers that it's laid out on something that's misexisting. And the only thing that we could find that I could bring to mind that was created at the beginning was there was Eden and the Garden of Eden. It says the Garden of Eden was east of Eden, and that Eden was a separate entity in itself. Well, if we take some of these original measurements and bring it back to the original terms, in the King James, it mentions that it's 1,500 miles across by converting furlongs. But furlongs was not a term that was used by the Hebrews. It was stadians. And stadians were very close to the same measurement, but there was a little bit of a difference. So when we go back and we use the actual measurements, we come up with a diameter of 1,325 miles for Eden, possibly, which is also what the outer dimensions of the new Mr. Jerusalem is. And when we put that on the map, using the Temple Mount as a center, I believe you have a slide for that.
And the New Jerusalem one.
Yeah, where it's the center of it is Eden. If you look at the Eden, where the center is on the Temple Mount area, Jerusalem, using it as the center, you see that it matches the description on what they said the garden was east of Eden, between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. Okay. So whenever you take a look at that, it shows the diameter with our new measurements using stadians. That gives you a radius of 662.8 miles from the center. And it says that the Garden of Eden was east of Eden. Well, if you look at the eastern gate, when you draw the cardinal points, right at the point east of that gate would be the Garden of Eden, which is exactly in between the Euphrates and the Nile River, as the text says. Now, what's interesting with this is they didn't have a satellite map. They did not know that point was exactly east of Mr. Jerusalem to better draw this out, and to give us this type of detail. This is a vision from away from Earth's ground. This is a sky view or a satellite view,
right?
To better describe this. Now, if the New Jerusalem were using this as a base, because it says Eden was removed from our sight, so this circular region was removed from our sight. And when Yeshua died, he said he was going up there to build mansions or offices, because the word refers to either category.
Okay.
And he says he laid it out in a square. Well, if you put the next slide down where it shows the overlay of the area with a square in the center of it, which should be the one just above it on the slides that I gave you. Now, this shows a basic square overlaid from the same center. And remember where the text says that he gave the land to the Israelites from the Nile to the Euphrates. Well, when you look at the cattle corner, the northeast corner and the southwest corner, you see where the points touch the Nile to the Euphrates. And what's interesting about this square is that's not a random square. Now, that's with the center being Mr. Jerusalem. When we go back to that previous slide you just showed with the Fibonacci spiral, that shows the Mr. relationship or God's fingerprint again, because all of nature has this, is built off of the Fibonacci sequence of numbers and spirals and such. Well, this has a direct Mr. relationship between the circular shape and the square in the center. This meets the Fibonacci sequence again. And this meets the full text where it says he laid out a square onto a basic surface, a foundation, and
Okay.
that the city is laid out in a square. Now, this is the actual city boundaries, is a square. And this happens to match the territory given to the Israelites. Remember, there was a mirror image of what's in heaven as he's giving them as like an imprint on the ground. Remember how Moses was told to build an ark for the covenant of the 10 for the 10 commandments.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the second ark because his image was looking from the one that was in heaven. And it gave him exact dimensions and to build one for on earth as far as the ark. Well, this is also a mirror image on what's in heaven that's going to be coming down here on earth. Remember the Our Father's prayer, where he says where heaven comes upon earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, well, this is where the second heaven enters. The Bible tells us where this New Jerusalem enters from the second heaven into the first heaven. It hovers above our land in our atmosphere, is what it's describing.
Well, I'm reading a chapter right now, the very first chapter of the New Jerusalem, Revelation 21, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And then, after that, it says, "And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." Now, it's this specific text that I'm referring to has actually been translated, the Hebrew translation from the New Testament. I'm looking at a specific translation from scriptureforall.org, and it'll actually break each word down. So, I think that's pretty cool. You can actually look at what the deciphering is, and I find that fantastic. So what exactly is, what does God mean when he says, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband?
Well, men tend to misequate anything that they're very proud of building as a woman's name or something beautiful like a woman. And he's doing the same thing here. That since Yeshua built the city, okay, and he's as proud of it as a bride, he's very proud of his creation that he did here of this new Mr. Jerusalem, and we would be too once we see it. And if you take a look at now the passage that you were giving is after the 1,000-year reign. After at the end of the 1,000-year reign, he takes the old earth and casts it into outer darkness, and he makes a brand new one where there's no oceans anymore. You have more land surface, just like it was during Adam and Eve's time. We had 71% more land at that time, and the impact that made the Gulf of Mexico knocked off 71% of our top crust, and that's the volume of our moon. And then the waters receded, creating our oceans today. But if you put the moon back where the ocean layer is a second layer of Earth, just like an onion. The top layer is our